Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ATU's Alumni Launch event. We're delighted to see so many of you here today to join us here in ATU Galway, and I'd also like to extend a special welcome to those of you who are joining us online. So just over a year and a half ago, about 18 months ago, ATU was formed, and hopefully you will realise and understand that we've achieved quite a lot in our first 18 months. However, even though we're 18 months old, we're not just seen as a new entity, we hope, in the sense that we are a university already with a history of over 50 years that has been gathered through our higher education provision from our legacy institutes. So if you are a graduate from the former regional technical colleges in Letterkenny, in Sligo or in Galway, or if you're from the former GMIT or IT Sligo or LYIT, or St Angela's College or Atlantic Technological University, you are amongst our alumni. And this launch event is for you, and this network is for you. So we estimate, we were doing a little bit of homework the other day, we estimate that collectively we have over 100,000 graduates, which is a remarkable number, and no doubt they are a remarkable group of alumni. And these are the people that we hope to we look forward to engaging with and developing our alumni network with over the next while. So those of you who know me, and many of you do here today, so I've worked with ATU and its legacy institutes for over 20 years. But my connection with ATU and its legacy institutes goes way back beyond that. So I stand here today as a proud graduate from what was the Regional Technical College in Galway. And for those of you now who are interested and good at maths, I might as well tell you that I was awarded my degree in 1991, okay? So you can do the calculations. So up until recently, if you were exploring the corridors here and you were wandering around here in Galway, you might have seen a picture of my younger self from the walls of the hotel school. But I should also really say that I'm also a graduate of Ulster University, and I'm a graduate of the University of Limerick. But to be honest with you, really Galway has a special place, and it will always be a special place. And I hope that is the same feeling for those of you who are graduates here today as well. So we're really excited about this launch event, because the afternoon is really about emphasising what we are, what you are, and what we will become. And we really want to emphasise and give the message to you is that ATU will always be here for our graduates and for our students. And we're really keen to ensure that our graduates stay connected, that they are inspired, and that they learn, and that we learn from you and we learn from one another. So it's really important that we have that and we give that message to you. So today, this afternoon, what we're going to do is that we're just going to do, as we said, it's going to be relatively informal, if you can, in an event like this, in an arena like this. But basically, we'll be hearing from our President, Dr. Orla Flynn, in a few moments, and then we have a number of keynote speakers, and particularly you'll be hearing initially from Michael Lone, and then Maria Gallo will lead us with a panel, and then I'll say a few words at the end. So these are the people that you'll be meeting, and the details are in your packs that you have there in front of you. But what we would like to do is just to scene set and give you an idea of where we are and where we've come from. We've compiled a short video as an introduction to our alumni network event, so I hope you enjoy this.
Atlantic Technological University was born from a deep legacy in higher education, with a thriving spirit to educate, advance and inspire. Our alumni together form a rich tapestry of graduates, leaders and innovators living and working across the globe, growing, progressing and inspiring, making an impact. Now at ATU, we're growing our alumni network, building a community to support, nurture and lead.
We are connected to each other and the university through our shared experience at ATU.
You'll always have access to the lifelong support of our alumni network.
Wherever you are in the world, you will always be part of the ATU family.
Be inspired and be the inspiration for future alumni.
As an ATU alumnus, you will always be part of our community, and we in ATU would like to continue being part of your journey. So please do stay in touch.
Always connected, always learning, always inspired, always ATU.
Thank you very much. So hopefully you'll be seeing the message, you'll be hearing the message, and we'll be living the message as we go through this. So as I said to you, we're delighted to be joined today by a number of our alumni, and in particular people who have shown that they've taken the skills and the experience and the education they've gained from ATU and such good use that they've made of it. But before we introduce those and before we listen to what they've come here to talk to us about today, I'd like to introduce you to our President. So I have the privilege and pleasure to introduce you to ATU's President, Dr. Orla Flynn. But I know that Orla doesn't really need an introduction in the sense that since she was appointed, she's managed on a weekly basis to visit multiple campuses, constantly engaging with staff and students, and doing so with such ease and with such good humour. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Dr. Orla Flynn.
Garamagad Sean agus smór na nórdom bhean seo agus fáilte mór a bheith choróibh Tróna. Delighted to be welcoming you all here on this lovely afternoon, and the sense of community out there was really palpable. And as John mentioned, about 18 months ago, just over 18 months ago, we had the fantastic launch. Our wonderful brand, Atlantic Technological University. We had Minister Harris, and we launched ATU. And as Sean said, it was a kind of a new birth arising from 3 former institutes of technology. And I guess I'd invite you to have a look at that map of Ireland and to have a look at our campuses and to look at the breadth of Ireland that we cover. Look at the terrain that we're travelling. Look at the communities that we are serving. So all the way from Galway right up to Letterkenny, and the 2 circles there are kind of our boundaries: Galway City in the south and the urban, only urban centre in the northern and western region, and the northwest city region where we have Derry City and Strabane District Council along with Letterkenny on the other side. So we have strong population centres, and of course right in the heart of our terrain we have Sligo as well. And then going west to Letterfrack or Connemara and Montbellew in the east, and of course our beautiful Mayo campus as well. So moving on, 18 months as ATU, and this is for those of you who aren't working with us on a day-to-day basis. And I know we have staff and students with us today who've probably heard this message already. We're looking forward to St. Angela's joining us in a couple of weeks' time. But who are we as ATU? So we're 23,000 plus learners, and I think we're probably closer to 24,000 now than 23,000. About half of those are online, and our engagement with people in remote parts of our region and well beyond the boundaries of our region, that's really significant. Full-time, part-time, undergraduate, postgraduate, really strong apprenticeship provision right across ATU, and we're looking forward to some positive news in the weeks ahead about growing apprenticeship numbers. We engage very strongly with industry and learners who are in the workplace. So a very varied and rich community of learners. We've over 2,200 staff, and we've again full-time, part-time staff, and we have staff distributed across all of our campuses. And one of the most magical things for me is to come to any campus and to bump into somebody from somewhere else. So thrilled today that we've colleagues from Donegal, from Sligo, from Mayo, and here from Galway, all here in the room together, supporting each other and supporting a common ATU aim. We've set up our governing body, we've set up our academic council, we're working through arriving at a common sets of policies and procedures and protocols, and quality assurance is at the heart of what we're about. I mentioned St. Angela's. 1st of November is the official date that St. Angela's will be joining us in ATU, and we're looking forward to a big celebration there. But the community in St. Angela's isn't just joining us on the 1st of November. They've been with us as part of our journey, certainly over the last 18 months and even longer. So that's going to be an exciting day. But we've also been busy on a whole load of other things. I'm not even mentioning some of the internal things like integration and lots of faculty formation activities happening, but we've worked together as one university to engage with the education and training boards in our region. We've signed an MOU with all 3 ETBs, Galway, Roscommon, Mayo, Sligo, Leitrim and Donegal, and we've launched a number of tertiary education awards. And we had Minister Harris in Sligo, I think, just last week, celebrating that. We've engaged with the Northern and Western Regional Assembly through a range of European regional development funding calls. One of those is the KT Boost call administered by Enterprise Ireland. Another is the ATU Rise call, and that's going to help us drive forward with our research capacity and capabilities. So we're very, very grateful to have such close partners with the Northern and Western Regional Assembly. I mentioned the Derry-Donegal Letterkenny linkage, but really we've got a very strong cross-border face now. Work that would have been done previously across all of our legacy institutes with partners in Northern Ireland are really moving on at pace now. We've the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, which includes Ulster University and ourselves, Donegal ETB and the Northwest Regional College, and this is a model that we really should be rolling out much more widely to support that cross-border community of learners and indeed workers. We were asked to lodge expressions of interest recently in Ireland for provision of additional places in nursing, but also in pharmacy and veterinary. And I was really delighted that while we were expecting our nursing submission to have a positive outcome, but we have had very positive signals back about both pharmacy and veterinary. Pharmacy, I see Jerry is in the audience, but pharmacy, in my opinion, is 95% over the line. I hope, fingers crossed, that's going to be led from Sligo and supported by colleagues around the university. But our veterinary submission is one of those really special submissions that couldn't have happened if we weren't a TU, led by our colleagues in Donegal, where we already have veterinary nursing, but ably supported by colleagues in Mount Bellew, where we have a working farm and the students will spend a full semester there. So if you happen to be meeting any politicians and a word in their ear, veterinary medicine for Atlantic TU is certainly something to get behind. We've also become part of a European University Alliance, and it's called EU Green, and this is a really interesting alliance, and it is an alliance of universities that serve regions that might be considered a bit more peripheral in Europe, regions that are not in the heart of big urban centres. And we are one of 9 universities across Europe, led by a Spanish partner, the University of Extremadura in western Spain. We have a Portuguese partner, Italian partner, Romanian, French, German, Polish, and Swedish partner as well. So this is a really interesting alliance, sustainability, education for sustainability, and encouraging that mobility around Europe. Because even though we might feel sometimes that we're on the periphery of Europe, much of what we do is right in the heart of Europe. And that's what we've been doing, and we've been working on that, but we do have some challenges ahead. So our big one at the moment is we're coming to a conclusion really of working on our first strategic plan, and I'll speak a little bit about that at the moment. We're also working on a high-level organisation design. And at this moment I want to thank all of my colleagues who've been working through this 18-month to 2-year transitional period, an interim transitional period, and we've achieved an awful lot of very good things, but we still have a lot more to do in relation to that. And those are 2 big challenges facing us at the moment. Big things, again, we have the national compact, our compact with the HEA in relation to a national performance framework, and areas where we will want to see things achieved over the next 4 to 5 years will be about continuing to provide an excellent education for our students, looking at a step change in our research capacity, and having that coherent engagement regionally, nationally, and internationally. Underpinning all of that is going to be transforming ourselves to deliver on that, and part of that is going to be about financial security, but that's just one of those. So in relation to our mission, our mission is going to be really around nurturing prosperity across our region. And we do that in a sustainable manner through excellent education and research. And we don't use the word nurture casually. Nurturing is about supporting and caring for something while it grows. And generally, nurturing is a collaborative exercise, and we will be doing that with a whole range of other organisations right across the region. And again, I mentioned the three key themes: that excellent education for our students, the excellent connected research capabilities, and lastly, that highly engaged ecosystem at regional, national and international levels. Philip Nolan said recently that ecosystems were messy, and you know what, he's right. Ecosystems are messy, but nevertheless they're deeply connected at many different layers and at many different levels. And in establishing an alumni network, we are actually adding a big part to that ecosystem of our engagement piece. We have alumni all over the world. Recently we welcomed, I think we have something like 93, we have about 1,100 international students from 93 countries studying in ATU. When they graduate, they're going to be gone back home to their home countries, and they are going to be alumni of ATU. So we have an alumni network of Irish people who studied locally and moved abroad. But we also have international students who've come from all the corners of the world to study here, and they too will be our ambassadors. We've taken, I suppose, a more liberal view of what an alumni network might include. We've already mentioned our former students of the RTCs, of the Institutes of Technology, and of ATU itself. But our staff have a legitimate right to be part of that network. We also have many friends and supporters, and I suppose I'm thinking of those companies whose birth maybe started in one of our innovation hubs, or people who've come through the New Frontiers programs that we offer, again, Enterprise Ireland funded, that we have seen in our innovation centres. So we do have a kind of an inclusive definition of our alumni. You're welcome to be part of our alumni, even if you've only studied with us for a short period of time, even if you didn't graduate, you're still welcome as part of our university. And all of this is going to be available on our website, Always Connected, ways in which we can not just stay connected with you, but that we can help you stay connected with each other. Many of you will be employers, and you will be looking to hire new graduates and new talent. So by staying connected with us, we can help you make that happen. We hope to introduce a number of different programs. One of them will be around our Student Ambassador program, where existing students support alumni who come on campus and who learn what it would be, who can connect with our alumni internationally and outside of ourselves. We will have an online presence and newsletter, and I do want to pay tribute to Lauren and the entire marketing team under the registrar, who've been a phenomenal force to drive us forward to this day. So lots of things planned, reunions, career support and so on. Our library, by the way, on the way in, one of the colleagues from the library came in to say, make sure to remind our alumni that they can still come and access our library. Even if you finish with us on a Friday and you graduate, you're still entitled to come in and use our libraries the following Monday. The Always Learning piece is kind of interesting as well. So there's going to be lots of opportunity for you to upskill and to come back and do CPD, but there's also opportunities for us to learn from you. So we look forward to welcoming you back to doing case studies and live lectures for our students. So lots of connected learning also. And then always inspired, lots of stories of inspiration, and we're going to hear some of those stories here today. But this next slide is a little bit of a surprise. It was a surprise that this slide only got into the deck this morning, and I'm thrilled that we have, for our alumni, so if you're watching online, I hope you'll be able to see the QR code, but we have 100 bursaries available free of charge for our first 100 alumni who want to sign up. And this is a Level 6 Special Purpose Award in the SDGs. And we have 100 bursaries on offer for the first to sign up. So delighted with this. And again, the offering of this Special Purpose Award is as a result of a wonderful team working as part of the N-Tutor National Project, but also working as part of the EU Green Alliance. And my particular thanks to John Scahill, to Jacqueline McCormick, and all the team working there. We will have a number of single modules available, 17 in fact, one each for the Sustainable Development Goals, and a lot of those are going to be free as well. So that's really it for me. I want to thank you for listening today. I've probably gone over my time slot, but it's my absolute pleasure to welcome as our keynote speaker today Michael Lohan, who's the Chief Executive Officer of IDA Ireland. I've mentioned Enterprise Ireland a couple of times, but the notion of nurturing prosperity in our region is about lots of things. It's about encouraging communities to work together in a sustainable way. It's about encouraging startups to have a resource right next door for them to engage and strengthen their innovation capacities and strengthen their export capabilities. But it's also about supporting organisations like the IDA when foreign direct investment is interested in coming to Ireland and is interested in coming to the region. We want to be there shoulder to shoulder with you in the IDA. So colleagues like Ricky, who's here, and Michelle Conahan in the Northwest, whom I met yesterday, when they bring companies in to the region, we want to be able to say there's talent available. We've got 5,000 graduates coming out every single year. And as well as that, if you set up a company here, we can support your lifelong learning needs through a whole range of options. So thrilled that Michael, who is a graduate of electronic engineering, who apparently studied in Sligo first, and then came to the big smoke, I suppose, as it was. I'm not saying it was that long ago, but came to study here and graduated with a degree in electronic engineering, and then went on to great things. And we're just delighted, Michael, that you could come back and give us your time here this afternoon, given the global role that you now have. So, colleagues, friends, delighted to hand over to Michael. Good morning.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you for those very warm, wishes as well. So very much appreciate it. So thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, maybe I'm going to take a few moments to share some thoughts about me as an individual and my journey from education. And before I start that, I suppose it would be remiss of me to not recognise, the monumental change that the TU status is for the Western region, and in particularly what's been achieved, in those last 18 months. And I think that's critically important, because, for a region that, and you can probably guess from maybe my accent, the West region is so critically important in terms of the prosperity that it can bring to families, to society, and indeed to the broader, economy here in Ireland. And I think it's important that, that recognition is got, and that we have all of the academic institutions now on the Western seaboard effectively under one umbrella. And I think that's where the power will come from, that network, and I think there was a comment about ecosystems are messy. Ecosystems are also very unique. They also bring value, they bring power, and they bring, delivery. And I think that's exactly what can happen through ATU. So I want to congratulate everyone involved in this, what is really a strategic partnership for the growth and the next generation for Ireland. Maybe just to give you a flavour from me and my experience, so I can put the question to bed. I actually did. I'm one of those people who started my educational career in Sligo. Being a proud Leitrim man, there was probably a couple of things that struck you when you, that transition from secondary into third level education. The importance of something called McGowan's coaches never became so important in your life as to what their timetable was, how quickly you could get from one location to another. And so it was with me, actually, and for many thousands of others along the Western seaboard. And it's funny because that partnership started with me and McGowan's coaches to Sligo for 2 years, where I'd done electronic engineering, and continued with me as I travelled here into Galway. So there's actually a connection there. But how important that is that, I saw and I had the ability with a group of my friends, actually 8 of us from Sligo came in a group here to which was the RTC here in Galway at the time. And we got to have a different experience. We moved from the Leitrim Bar to the King's Head, so that also was an experience. But one thing that was consistent as well as part of this is the importance of good rain gear, because it's still the west of Ireland. But I say that in some ways because that's also part of the journey. And I think what we looked at and what I really was impressed with as the President, put forward the slides a moment ago is the inclusiveness of the network that you're establishing here. Because that's exactly what I felt in Sligo. That's exactly what I felt here in this building, on this campus, when I was here, when my colleagues came here. We were accepted as the same students on the continuation of our educational journey. And I think that's important. That was important for me because, it meant that education then became central and a part of what I needed to do. Because, yes, I'm a graduate of Sligo, I'm a graduate here of Galway. I'm also a graduate of a small university on the other side of Galway. I'm also a graduate of DCU and of UCC. But that all seeded from my first experiences in Sligo and here in Galway. That openness, that connectedness, and being part of that. And that's something I think that, has stayed with me, the importance of that lifelong journey. And it's probably something as we as individuals and people that, would have maybe within a position of leadership or direction or influence across our various spheres, need to probably bring to the fore more. We need to encourage more lifelong learning. We need to encourage more diversity of learning, because I didn't do electronic engineering for my entire career. In fact, it probably was lucky that I moved away from it quite quickly in some ways. But it did set me up in terms of what it means to be international business. It did give me that skill set in terms of engaging and negotiating and I think working with people. Because at the end of the day, it's all about success is based on the relationships we have, the networks we have, and the ability to communicate and to deliver results. And I think that's what I got from that as well. So I just wanted to share that personal piece before maybe I share some thoughts from an FDI perspective, and in particular some engagements with you from IDA's perspective. So if I switch gears into the role that I'm in as CEO of IDA, I'm very privileged to have this position. It's an organisation that, has really set the course and been part of the evolution of Irish society, and indeed of the careers that many Irish people have enjoyed and continue to enjoy. And there was great satisfaction for me. This month, I celebrate 20 years in IDA. So I've actually evolved and I've had 6 different careers in my time in IDA, and I'm fortunate now to have the role as CEO. But I'm also very fortunate to have seen during that period the quality and the depth of the skill base and the educational system that has delivered real Irish leaders that are leading global firms from Ireland, in Ireland, and indeed across the globe. And it has those networks that are so critically important as we go to seek what the next generation looks like of investment and foreign direct investment, and indeed enterprise investment, and those connections and that spillover that happens between indigenous and foreign direct investment. And in fact, if there was any location in Ireland that best, I suppose, highlights that, is here in Galway. That spirit of entrepreneurship, that spirit of collaboration, that spirit of partnership is really evident here in Galway, and something that I certainly had, because in my early career as well, I actually spent my early days, and probably those foundational days as you are in industry, was here in Galway with a company called Nortel Networks, which many in Galway will be very familiar with, and indeed throughout the network. And as we look now to the future, I suppose from an FDI perspective, just, and in 2 weeks' time I head back into the US market with Minister Coveney. I can tell you the top 2 items that's going to be in discussion at each and every meeting. Talent is going to be number 1, and it's going to be about innovation, research and digitalisation. They are going to be key topics in every discussion, irrespective of the sector is medical device, pharmaceutical, technology, financial services. They will be common themes that will be spoke across all areas. And that's why it's so important that institutions like ATU, that we are producing the type of STEM expertise that's necessary for these sectors, because these sectors are changing, and we need to respond to those changes in terms of emerging skills. Skills such as AI, advanced manufacturing, advanced therapeutics that's happening in cell and gene therapy, for example. Sustainability, which I'm delighted to see, your bursary here this morning or this afternoon. Cloud computing and indeed 5G, all new areas of skills that we need to make sure we're ready for. And maybe just to put that in some context as well, from an IDA perspective, as we engage with client companies and doing some, I suppose, analysis through our own research on this, we're seeing that an area that we're seeing emerging is that fundamental digital and data and for non-IT workers needs to improve in the Irish context. And, we can talk about some stats here and say we are probably below the European average in this area. And these basic digital skills, right, for our population are critically important. They're fundamental in terms of digital and data skills, and we need to make sure that our future graduates and indeed our current workforce is in a position to upskill and reskill and have these skills of the future. And I think that's where the strengths of ATU can come to the fore, and that's where actually you've shown that leadership, because through your strengths and partnerships with industry, you're maintaining that responsive educational system and providing that necessary training and upskill that's required. And maybe just to give some examples of that, because I think it's important. And, I think to recognise and to thank ATU in all of your advisors, whether it's from Letterkenny, Sligo or here in Galway, the great support that you give Ricky and Michelle, and indeed the entire IDA team as we go about our business. Because I'll be honest, folks, we can't exist without the network that is the ecosystem in Ireland, and you're a key component of that ecosystem. So some of the examples I want to talk about is the partnership you had here with Thermo King here in Galway in terms of manufacturing automation. MSc in supply chain analytics that was developed as well, critical. Diploma in validation and digitalisation technologies. Again, health informatics, another diploma delivered. The practical experience that we see in engagements with ATU and with your staff, engaging with client companies, I have to say is critically important. And we see that in terms of the technologies, emerging technologies, such as the cluster that's been built in cybersecurity. I also think we have to recognise, the impact you've had from a spin-out perspective. We have a company here in Galway, Cerenovus, who have, been absolutely inspirational in terms of the innovation that they delivered in terms of the treatment of stroke. And not alone that, have been acquired by J&J, one of the largest companies in the world, and recognised with a gold medal in terms of their innovation, again, seeded out of the expertise that is ATU. But we have to make sure that we increase these opportunities as well, both for those that are in education and that are in the workforce, and indeed for those to access education from all areas. And that's why I think the new tertiary degree programme, which again was mentioned by Orla, is so critically important. I think we need to make sure that every avenue is opened for education, for upskilling and for lifelong learning. Just to say that, as I think also from the ATU's perspective and indeed from the higher education perspective, you're central to the national conversation on lifelong learning. And the TUs have been at the forefront of providing accessibility. And I mentioned, sort of in my scenario, many of the things I have done past my primary degree have been about lifelong learning, have been about evolving my thoughts and the diversity of my experience as well. And I do believe as well that the career guidance that you can give is so critically important, both for the students we have today, but also I think there's possibly an outreach we can look at to the future as a model, because again, I think that area of lifelong learning is so important. Maybe just to change tack for a moment and just speak about innovation. It is well documented and known that companies and enterprises that have an innovation focus and an R&D mandate will be successful and prove to be resilient. And I think that's where, through institutions like ATU, making sure we have the right infrastructure and indeed skill base to enable that to happen is so important. We look at the critical challenges that the industry is facing, and I mentioned some of them earlier in terms of digitalisation. It requires a range of technologies and systems, from data analytics, machine learning, cybersecurity, blockchain, right? Digitalisation requires strategic investment in R&D that balances experimental and industrial. And I think that's something from an IDA perspective that we are very supportive of in terms of deepening that research capability that's across institutions like ATU. I'd also maybe like to acknowledge the foresight and leadership of ATU. Two areas that I wanted to particularly highlight, and both were highlighted previously, is the cross-border skills collaboration. And I think that's critically important. In terms of building research capability, in terms of new research centres, we're looking at in Sligo, the European Digital Innovation Hub. We're looking at the Advanced Innovation Manufacturing Centre as well, supply chain. The Shared Ireland Fund, where you are part of a feasibility in terms of a new RegTech supercluster. These are critically important, and I want to acknowledge, I suppose, your leadership in those areas as well. I also want to acknowledge the area of sustainability, critically important. Again, when we speak with organisations, sustainability is very much at the core, and I think very much welcome your initiative, and indeed your joining of the EU-European Alliance, which I think again speaks to your ambition and your leadership. So in closing, I'd like again to thank Orla for the very kind invitation. As a proud, I suppose, graduate from Sligo and from Galway here in the days that I was in RTC and now in ATU, it gives me pleasure to actually come back to the campus here and indeed in Sligo. And I remarked earlier that, a few years ago, it's a good few years ago, I would have played football here actually on where the football pitch was. But now we're looking at campuses which have new infrastructure, new buildings, a new perspective that I suppose aligns to the ambition that you have and that we as a state have in terms of education. And I want to thank you for that leadership and to wish you every success with your future endeavours, with your strategy and indeed with your network, which is really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's very inspiring. It's very inspiring. It's great to hear such words of wisdom to us here. So just while we're setting up our next section, what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite Dr. Maria Gallo, and I'd also like to invite our other speakers to join us here on the podium. So we'd like to invite Keith Moran, Damien McCallan and Evelyn O'Toole, please. So this afternoon what we'll be having a session here with our panel discussion. And I'd like to introduce you, just here on my left is Dr. Maria Gallo. And Dr. Maria Gallo is the founder and managing director of KITE, which is Keeping in Touch Education, and the key points of it. And Maria has over 20 years experience in higher education leadership in both Ireland and abroad. And in particularly, she's a visiting research fellow at the Centre for Social Innovation at Trinity Business School in Trinity College Dublin. Maria is no stranger to ATU and no stranger to the work that we've been doing here. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is introduce you to Maria, who will in turn introduce the panel, and hope you enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. And it is true, I am no stranger to the ATU community. I'd like to think of myself as a bit of a friend of the ATU. I've been a long-time friend in so many capacities at the ATU. And as Sean alluded to, I'm also very passionate about alumni. And as someone who's been living in the Northwest in Donegal for over 20 years, I'm very passionate to see that we now have this incredible ecosystem of alumni that we can now tap along the entire Western Seaboard. And as was mentioned by the esteemed president, the importance of that ecosystem as it has that imprint around the world. If I may just also just highlight too that I actually wrote a book on this called The Alumni Way, Building Lifelong Value from Your University Investment. And the reason I mention it is because the ATU features in this book. This book has gone all around the world. It has a lot of critical acclaim. It's been published by Bristol University Press. And ATU features in the book because so many of the examples of excellent connection between community and the institution, alumni, and students, and that kind of ecosystem has really comes to the fore in that, especially in the case of ATU as a place where we can create relatable role models and inspiring people and inspiring alumni that can go around the world. So I am very honored to be involved as the moderator today for this esteemed panel of alumni. And I will take this opportunity to first introduce our panel here. So starting on my right and going across, we have a great panel here this afternoon. Our first panelist is here on my left, Damien McCallan. And Damien McCallan is the Chief Operations Officer at the HSE. He is responsible for the oversight of the day-to-day operations within the HSE and over 100,000 staff. The HSE responsible for the delivery of health and social care, as you know, in Ireland, and he has held a lead role during the COVID-19 pandemic response as the head of the successful vaccination and test and trace programs. He's also held a variety of other roles prior to this, including leading HSE's response to the screening crisis and reestablishing trust in the state cervical screening program. And if you look in your brochure, you can see all of the other programs that Damien and projects that Damien has been involved in. Damien has also a strong interest in cross-border cooperation and served as a chairperson and director general of the organization responsible for the cross-border health programs called COT. He is also currently the deputy chairperson of Safe Food. That's the organization that is also an all-Ireland body to promote the awareness and knowledge of food safety and nutrition on the island of Ireland. Damien is originally qualified from ATU Donegal in computing and subsequently completed an MSc in Innovation Management between the University of Ulster and ATU Donegal. So Damien, you're very welcome. I also can, thank you. I'm also pleased to introduce Evelyn O'Toole. Evelyn is the founder and chief executive officer of Complete Laboratory Solutions, CLS, and has been a scientist for over 30 years. Sometimes we don't really like to show our age, sometimes I know, so we'll just say for a number of years. And set up in 1994, CLS is Ireland's highest accredited contract laboratory, providing sampling and analysis and transfer their own fully trained analysts and laboratory personnel and managed services to the medtech, pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical, food, and environmental sectors. CLS partner with over 600 plus national and international clients, supported by 240 employees across the 3 locations. That includes across Galway, Bray, Wicklow, and across different parts of Ireland. Evelyn is a chairperson of the West Regional Enterprise Plan, the EY Entrepreneur of the Year judge. She's Irish MedTech Association board member and Cancer Care West Support Centre committee member. She received an honorary doctorate from from the University of Galway and a fellowship from ATU Galway, and won the 2017 Industry EY Entrepreneur of the Year. Evelyn is an alum of ATU Sligo. Welcome, Evelyn. Thank you. Our third member of our panel is Keith Moran. He is the CEO of SL Controls, an international manufacturing organization specializing in equipment systems, integration, and system support. SL Controls was established in 2002 and has grown from a Sligo-based enterprise into an international business. Keith oversaw the company through the startup phase and rapid growth period, where it was named one of Deloitte's 50 fastest growing companies in Ireland. He also led the company as it expanded internationally and oversaw its acquisition by the Denmark-based multinational NNIT. Keith continues to serve as SL Controls CEO and also sits on the board of regional business organizations. He leads a team that delivers transformational change solutions in the pharmaceutical and medical device industries with expertise in business development, change management, building strong, resilient, and adaptable teams that are focused on innovation and continuous improvement. Keith holds an Eng Tech in electrical engineering from ATU Sligo and an MBS in innovation and leadership from ATU Donegal. You're very welcome, Keith. Thank you for joining us. I have a number of questions that I'm going to put to the panel. And what I really think is very special about today's event is this theme that we have around us today. Always inspired, always connected, always learning, always ATU. And I'm going to use that to draw on the kind of questions that we're going to ask the panel. So if we start with always inspired, nothing is more inspiring than this panel getting involved in business, getting involved in the community, getting involved back at ATU. So maybe if I could just ask the panel, maybe starting with you, Damien, if you would mind just telling us a little bit about your journey from graduation to your career today.
Yeah, sure. I actually started in Galway, but unlike Michael, I found the King's Head too early, so I was doing hotel management and switched back to Letterkenny, then actually doing computers. I had sort of got this mad idea that computers might be the direction to go, so I spent 2 years there and then moved to the UK. And I think, in fairness, my experience in Letterkenny, I worked in British Airways for 10 years in the UK in the aviation industry, so it gave me the confidence, I guess, to go. The 2 years was a brilliant experience. We still actually meet. That class that I was in still meet every year. In January, we have a sort of a annual reunion, not in the King's Head, but up in Donegal. Galway was just, as we've got older, we're more settled in our ways. But it gave you the confidence, I think, number one. It was a great experience, made great friends there, great learning there, and it gave me the confidence to go and develop my career from there. So I worked for 10 years in British Airways. Travelled a good bit with that job, which was fantastic to give you an opportunity to see a little bit of the world. But it meant it did give you confidence as you went around the world working computers. Came back to Ireland then and still worked in computers before moving into the health sector. And then since that time, I've gradually worked through a whole range of roles, I suppose. Little did I know, myself and Keith were talking earlier, we both actually did that Masters in Innovation.
Yes,
I was in the first cohort that came through, and it was fantastic. And actually how it came about was Letterkenny actually had a similar event to this at that stage, trying to establish an alumni, and got talking to people in the college, and they were just initiating the course. And from that, again, I saw the opportunity to take on the course, just something that I'd always wanted to do that I'd never done, in terms of going back to Michael's point about lifelong learning. So it shows you how small little connections like that can give you opportunities in terms of both education and employment. And since that time in the HSE, then when I moved into the HSE a number of years, I've had a variety of roles through IT, different service management roles, worked back in the Northwest, which was great, where I met many people who actually would have been in college with me around that time and graduated through that. And I think going back to Michael's point and Orla's point earlier, healthcare is an area of huge opportunity. Globally, there's a huge shortage of resources. A lot of the courses in Ireland traditionally were often locked into different universities, the more traditional colleges. So it's great to see something like the pharmacy course, and I know there's other opportunities there. But I know in the States, globally, huge shortage. The NHS in England, one of their biggest challenges, we're speaking to some of their senior people recently, and their number one challenge is workforce and talent. So similarly here, where we have areas of services, we know we're not doing what we want to do for the public, for people. We need a broader base of professionals, and I see a lot of opportunity in that area as well. So just to link it. But I guess going back to your core question, the course just gave me a basis to move forward, gave me confidence to move into a particular sector, and probably through that and over time developed the confidence to work out into a broader area other than where I started, a bit like Michael described his initial journey. So I think there's opportunities for people through that education. And also I think for me at the time where I was as a young person in the west of Ireland, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, which is evidenced by going to Galway for 2 weeks and then jumping to Letterkenny. So parents were having conniptions. King's Head did have something to do with that. I'd say they looked and thought, look, and I had done a computer course over the summer for a couple of weeks and thought this is interesting. And as I say, it gave me massive opportunity. And Letterkenny then allowed me to build on that and develop it out.
And you just sometimes never know the direction that you're going to take. So it's really exciting to be able to think you can take this trajectory. And I always say if there are students or alumni listening that are recent alumni, is like, ask people like Damien for their career stories. It's always nice to hear how they kind of meander. It's not always a linear direction. We often meander through our lives and our careers. So I think that's really exciting. So thank you for that. Evelyn, do you want to talk to us a little bit about your career story and how you got from graduation to where you are today?
Sure. So it's lovely to be here today. Thanks for the invitation. I think it's a fantastic idea. I do have two colleagues with me, Caroline, who's head of our finance. She's a GMIT graduate, and Anne O'Donnell, a bit like Damien, only for the swap was the other way around, and did Letterkenny for 2 weeks and then transferred to NUIG. So I'd say there's a lot of transferring in the room. Yeah. So I grew up outside Clifton on the Yomi side, so a very rural setting. And probably in the last year of school, I spotted a syllabus for a science subject called toxicology, and I headed to Athlone to do toxicology. And after doing 2 years into the course, I realised the job prospects really wouldn't suit me. So I finished with the cert, went to UK for a year, tested industrial paints, worked in a factory, 38 guys and myself. It worked really well. It was it was a great learning curve, and applied to Sligo with the hope to get into an environmental course called Pollution Assessment and Control. So it was the first year it was going to be run. I think I identified with the course more so. I was hoping it would be easier than the course I had been through. So I was looking for something easier that maybe suited me. And then I was lucky enough after finishing that course to get a job managing an internal lab for a fish company out in Carna in Connemara. So it was 29 miles from my front door. I used to hitch it every day, there and back. And after 2.5 years, that burnt down, and I was made redundant. And I set up a company called CLS within 2 weeks. So it was myself, a Peugeot 205 van. I had equipment from the lab, from the company that I worked with, because the lab was like an apex. The company was all one large modern plant, and the lab was like an apex with like a concrete base at the back, and it didn't burn. So it was the only piece that did stay. So gathered all the equipment, moved with my colleagues for 2 weeks until they decided that we all just had to be let go. In my mind, in that first job, something I would have thought year on year since is probably, just like Damien referenced as well, sometimes your early stage forms you, especially the experience you get and exposure you get in your first role, your second role. And sometimes you can grip opportunities and doors open, some will close and you walk through them. And I certainly did that. So I didn't always push myself forward, but if a door opened, I always walked through it. I never said no. And I suppose that's been my philosophy. I have the privilege of being a chief executive of CLS still, 29 years on, 30 years next year.
Saw that, an anniversary coming up.
Yeah, so 240 people. We were based on 10 sites across the country. We've got 3 of our own facilities. And it started, I suppose, again, something that resonates with me and ATU. It started in a very remote location called Rasmuck. And textbook, it was a failure. I didn't have enough experience. I was 25. The location was madness. And just in terms of joining the dots and who we are, and Michael and Orla both mentioned ecosystems, and in the context of an ecosystem, where that plays, and in the context of a region, we're in transition. Even though we've got a very vibrant city with medtech, and we're a very vibrant region, as a region we're in transition because our counties are vast, our spaces are really big, and there's a lot of places like Letterfrack that really, really needs development like ATU has done. And then there's the other context, I suppose, of life cycle. So we all have a life cycle, sadly. Our companies do also. So you start very small, like we did. An indigenous kind of no hope goes to brand protector and becomes really successful internationally and at home. And then it's full of helping. So that ecosystem of helping each other. So in life, when you become successful, you're either being helped or you're helping. And that continues. So our next phase is all about scaling and going faster. And hopefully decongesting some of the areas that Damien mentioned in healthcare, and also supporting those FDIs critically when they arrive and they're setting up new sites in Ireland.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Evelyn. I think it's really interesting that, you mentioned about that not everything is, you always have to have a growth mindset, this idea that, sometimes we have to learn from our failures and, reflect on them, and also to draw on our ecosystem. So now we have this alumni ecosystem that we can also now draw on and say, who here has business acumen, who has help, and, when people are thinking about, if you're thinking of being that future entrepreneur, you can now draw on an ecosystem to help support you. So that's, that's there and to the ready. Keith, can I come to you and ask you, tell me a little bit about your journey from when you graduated through to where you find yourself today?
Absolutely. I think mine is more, how did I get to graduation before the career journey? Because there's a bit of a backstory to that. But quickly I'll go through it because there is a link and it calls out many of the facets that the ATU can support people with. But I guess I started off doing accounting and computing, and I guess I'm the poster child for anybody that has any kids there that are wondering, will our child doesn't know what they want to do. And accounting and computing certainly wasn't for me. I didn't like the economics, and the irony of that is my wife is an economics lecturer in ATU Sligo now, so I get it now. So I left that, and I came back and I did electronic engineering. and did electronic engineering, and then went working in a summer job in a great Sligo company, Lotus Works. And as part of that, a lecturer in ATU came back to work in Lotus Works to set up the systems integration department, which is what SL Controls does now. And he said, would you fancy coming in and working in the department and going back to do online learning, which is a great opportunity for people to earn and learn. So I said, you know what, I will. And I did that for a couple of years, and then decided, Lotus Works were focused on instrumentation, data centers, not really focused on their core business of what we wanted to do with systems integration. So I said to which is now our co-founder Shane Loughlin, I said, there's an opportunity here to split out. What do you think? So we gathered a few quid. We got 40,000 euro together at the time, back in 2002, and we started in a little county enterprise unit in Ballintoher, which was where we started. And then from there, I guess, the company grew. And then eventually I went back and I went full circle and I did a Master's in Innovation and Leadership, which I guess through the business and growing the business gave me more of a rounding of business and could make the link with the course. But so it's been a bit of a checkered journey, but one that has brought us to a point now where Michael earlier talked about cell and gene therapy and digitalization and data analytics and how critical that's going to be. Like, we've been the leaders in Ireland in manufacturing for a long time, but data analytics, data digitalization is going to be critical in manufacturing, and if we don't stay on top of that, we will fall behind. We certainly will not be the leaders in cell and gene therapy. And that is what is going to change manufacturing over the next 5-10 years. So at SL Controls, we're focused on data, we're focused on digitalization. It's been a good journey, it's still going. Obviously, we were acquired back in July of 2021. Thankfully, we're moving on now as a group company, part of the Novo Nordisk group. So we press on, and that's where the career is to date.
It's exciting. Great. Thank you, Keith. And I think what that really kind of leads really nicely into the idea of always connected. So we have some connections between yourselves within, a whole ecosystem of people here that are all connected based on course or based on area of study, based on interests, based on these priority areas. And I think that collectively we have an opportunity to look at those together as alumni, but also looking at things as the president mentioned earlier about the Sustainable Development Goals too, some of this, how we can make contributions to the SDGs. So if I just kind of move on to some questions around always connected, I'd just be interested to know, and maybe I'll just I'll mix it up, and I'll start with you, Evelyn. In what ways have you stayed connected with ATU? I want you to get creative here. Think about things that you might have done, maybe with the institution, with your friends, with staff, with lecturers, and how that might have had an importance or an impact on you. So, Evelyn, what do you think?
So, at all levels, I guess. The HEI process and overall the structure of training, education, hiring graduates, close collaborations with the colleges has been really important to CLS. I had a conversation with Jean outside, and I was hoping that maybe we can become bigger and closer with Sligo. Because I'd love that, going back into my roots there. Because I set up a business in Connemara and I'm very much involved in the Galway medtech scene, I've worked much closer with GMIT and INUIG as a result. But continuous learning, Michael mentioned that one of the KPIs for winning projects abroad will always be the talent. And then when you get inside the pool within the country, the challenge is actually holding people's interest. Equally, we'll say when we do surveys and we find out what keeps us at CLS, in CLS, it's engagement, it's development, and terms are third. And that development piece is hugely linked to developing options for both technical and also different types of skills. But just in the context of, I guess, the launch today and joining up the dots on the map that was put up with different centres, if we could maybe look at a word and we call it relationship ability. And it's probably one of our currencies that makes us successful or not outside our skills. So our purpose and also our ability to be able to get on with other people and our natural ability to reach out to other people, to connect, grow, ask, offer. And I think that's what today does. I get to know a new network within the ATU. They leverage off me, I leverage off them. But essentially we'll collaborate. And once there's collaboration, there's always something building. And I think that's critical. Given a forum, a network, and it kind of turns people like Michael into a local lad again. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, absolutely.
Knowing that the face of the HSE has links to Galway, lives in Sligo, did a little stint in LY, you know, and again, Leitrim, Sligo. So it all brings the whole context of people back into it again. We're just people in roles, managing companies, representing the country, building huge universities, but it's all people and it's all the relationship, and it's always easier to reach back to somebody with that connection in mind because you've got something in common.
Absolutely, and that's what alumni is all about, right? Is that human connection?
Yeah.
You know, so a decade of my research on alumni connection, I have identified, 4 key traits that you've kind of really highlighted of what makes for savvy and connected alumni, and that includes, being reflective, which is what we're doing today, is like reflecting on, how can alumni have that kind of potential. The idea of curiosity, and that's what I love about Irish people. People would call that nosy, but we call that curiosity, right? So this is like something, where we can ask curious questions, we can learn about what can actually make make things better. This idea of passion. So you can feel that that passion is really palatable up here, of people passionate about their area of interest around their companies. And I think that's really important that we kind of look at. But also the passion that we can bring to our communities. So we have a certain skill set and talent that we can bring out beyond just our careers, but to our communities. And then finally, the idea of generosity and how you could give back. And that's what we want to talk about too, is how we can kind of give back to our wider ecosystem. So if I can go to you, Keith, can you you can talk to me a little bit too about this idea of, your connection back to ATU, friends, family, family, even friends, family, connections to the institution. Talk to me about how you've connected back with ATU.
Yeah, well, I think what's really progressed over the last number of years is the links to industry. And I think the engineering department in the ATU have done a great job in linking to industry, because years ago that wasn't so strong. And I think that focus has really brought us together. You have the likes of the Engineering Expo every year that connects you with the graduates, connects you with the updates in the industry and what's happening in the industry. But I suppose one of the main things I've been involved in was the AIM Centre in Sligo. It's Advanced Manufacturing Centre that's being built and will be open fairly shortly in Sligo. And that's a key thing for the advancement in manufacturing and that digitalisation that we talk about. So at the start, we were the industry representative in that, in terms of the application for the ERDF funding that we talked about earlier on. So we felt that was really key to be involved and really come together as a group and as an ecosystem. And what we will hope that will further strengthen the ecosystem in terms of bringing, industry in Sligo and outer, linking it to the Digital Manufacturing Centre in Limerick, which is the hub from the IDA's perspective. And rather than having all these little bits and pieces all around, that everybody's linked in together, and then all the networking happens, you have that ecosystem. So I felt that, the AIM Centre is a really strategic development for the Northwest, because sometimes, I will beat the Sligo drum that we get left and we're over here, and, the DMI might be down in Limerick, but you never really get tapping into it. But now with the hub and spoke type, network, we can really all come together and that networking can happen. So that's one of the ones, that we were very happy to be involved in. Obviously, guest lectures, things like that always happen, and living and working in Sligo. Yeah, you would be very close to ATU Sligo in particular, and a lot of networking, a lot of previous graduates from ATU have come into SL Controls. So a lot of really important things happening there, but it's all to do with the focus on links to industry.
I think that's really interesting. And you kind of glossed around it. You talked a little bit, guest lecturing, but they do talk, and what research would suggest around the alumni space is that you bring alumni in, they become the relatable role models, people that they can see in the classroom that remind them of them, and that can help spur on that inspiration that people need. Maybe if they're first in family to go to university, and there's there's somebody in the classroom that looks like me, that is like me, is from Leitrim, etc. And so those are important little spokes that people like yourself are going into the classroom and providing. So you don't even realize how important those little things can be.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it can inspire people to come together and drive a new idea. Like 5 of our senior leadership team, we were classmates.
Yeah,
we were classmates and one lecturer, so we've grown from that. So those stories can be told, and that can tell people we can do that too. So it's important.
Absolutely. And so you can talk about that unification. It's like we stayed friends, and then we actually have to work together now for a long time. It's not just the 3 years in school. I love that. Thanks. Terrific. Damien, if I can turn to you, can you talk to me a little bit about your connections to ATU and your ongoing connection, how you've stayed always connected?
Yeah, probably look at it at a couple of levels. I mean, firstly, at a personal level, I mentioned that we've all stayed friends. We meet every year.
I love that.
When people are talking about the 90s, I'm going, God, I thought it was young. I'm in the 80s, so in the early 80s, so I'm the wrong end of all this. But we still meet and we still keep together. I mentioned how there was a reunion in Letterkenny, and out of that came the idea around the first Masters in Innovation that myself and Keith have both done. I think those connections are important. Some of those at a personal level, just you've been through similar sort of journeys. They may also bring professional connections as well, but even if they don't, they're really important links, and they keep your connection back to where you came from, those formative years when you come through college at the start. Connections in general are vital in any walk of life. That's how we do things, through people. We do things with people. We join up organizations together. We sometimes put language around it, ecosystems and various things, but in simple terms, that's what makes things work, whether in our sector in healthcare, communities working together. When I was involved in the ambulance service, we linked in with first responders, communities who come out who'll save people's lives. We've records there of several hundred people who've had cardiac arrest who now have survived because of communities' connection into the public health service, the ambulance service, where they've had a heart attack or a cardiac arrest. So those type of things show how connections are important at a practical level. But even in the pandemic, we worked with, you'd never have thought the IDA and the public health system, where's the connection? The IDA were vital in our early days, whether it was about PPE or testing systems, and we worked with people in the Far East, Eileen in the Far East. I remember getting delivery from China at one stage of all this testing equipment, and my knowledge of testing before the pandemic would have been very limited. I wouldn't have had a CV like Evelyn here beside me in terms of laboratories. But I remember all of this stuff coming from China overnight, and we relied on the IDA to make sure this was okay. And people will have seen some of the criticism of some of the PPE and whether it was good or bad, but I can tell you in the storm that it was at the time, it was about trying to secure that. We were competing with other countries, and what actually secured that for us was the relationships and the connections that the IDA had that did it. And similarly in the States, when we had problems, when Trump said nothing's exiting America, nothing is leaving America, we had connections with companies like Abbott, with Roche and so on. Those connections were Irish people from here, many of whom I'm sure came through ATU, were people that we were able to open little doors, just get enough to keep us moving at the time, and gradually work that through. So you think of things that you'll never connect with, but yet when you step back from it and you have to deal with some issues, those are the things in terms of connections, and they're very important. And then translating it back into my own sector in healthcare, we talked earlier, I mentioned, and the President mentioned about pharmacy. Globally, healthcare staff over the next 10 to 20 years, there's a huge shortage. Most countries haven't been training enough. They're now realising that. In Ireland, it was quite a closed system, I think it's fair to say. Some of the courses were proportionate, the points were proportionate to restricted access rather than actual what was needed. And it's great to see things like pharmacy, the nursing side. We recruited 1,200 nurses internationally last year. There's challenges for us ethically about that as well in terms of how we do that. We've had to be much more careful. And again, obviously, if we can grow our own people. I would also say we shouldn't worry about people travelling overseas. I have a son in Australia. In industry, people travel to learn. In healthcare, they travel to learn. We've always done it. I think the thing you need to do is build that into your planning around your workforce at a national level so that you allow for that. Because some of our best and brightest have gone and learned overseas and come back again. So I think that's really important in terms of the role ATU and the other new universities can play in terms of breaking down some of those barriers that were there. And we talked about the cross-border earlier. I'm familiar with that in terms of McGee College are now training doctors, a huge challenge for us in Donegal. They had huge issues in terms of getting agreement around that because it was a traditional model in Belfast. So I think that's where the technology universities and particularly ATU and our challenges here on the West Coast in attracting and retaining staff can be really important in bringing people through. They have their roots in the West, will want to come back to the West, and that will ensure we have a good supply of healthcare workers for the next 20, 30 years. And it is literally looking that far out. It's not the next 5 years, the next 10 years. It's the next 20 or 30 years that we need to be looking at. And someone said something to me outside, is some of the jobs that we're looking at today, there are jobs there that we won't even know about, that haven't been invented, and the way things will change. So I think that's where those new universities, particularly ATU in the West here, there's huge opportunity around healthcare, but also obviously some of the other areas that have been mentioned as well.
So it allows for that dynamicness to happen. I love that idea of the transformational impact that, we forget that a higher education experience can be for people. It can be very transformational, and then connected to that is that, well, how can we make sure that we're fostering that, by encouraging people to go abroad or to having these different kinds of experiences. And, the question I, would always wonder is how can ATU, help, or how can people think of their alumni network and help them to have a positive experience if they go to Canada or Australia or wherever? Maybe they can tap into, connecting with those people that are there. When you've had that shared experience with someone, who doesn't love talking about themselves? We got to pay, we love talking about ourselves. So if you reach out to us on LinkedIn, we will spend those 10 or 15 minutes telling us their career story. And then you have a connection with somebody that might be able to open a few doors to help you. And I think that's the value of an alumni network.
And just I think our county roots in Ireland are really important.
Oh, yes, very important.
Michael's first line was around a proud Leitrim man, Sligo, wherever it is. So people do gravitate back. So it's really important in terms of the role the ATU can play.
Absolutely.
That people, if they do travel, that they can come back and connect to that. Absolutely. It's like my son went to Australia with his girlfriend, and the first question our press office, one of the ladies asked me was, where's his girlfriend from? I said, Mayo, you're fine. She'll come home. She'll want to come home. Mayo, girlfriend come home. This guy intended to stay in Australia. They're coming home for Christmas. I'm not sure who's gone back and who's stayed. But joking aside, it is really important then that you're grounded, and we've talked about it here today, and that's a way that we can keep the talent into what is largely, a relatively rural area. When you look in global terms, you go to the States and people talk about big cities, and Michael would see that on his travels, or even around Europe. You go to cities. I was in Madrid a while ago there just for a weekend, 8-9 million people. The scale of those places are huge. So it's really important for us that those county roots, and I think that's where the ATU and the alumni can play a strong role. Absolutely.
We always say small but mighty, right? Exactly. So what we can do in this region to be small and mighty. If I can kind of shift now in thinking about that always learning idea. Now, already we've had our panel talking about their, I was going to say serial learning experiences. But I wonder if you could just maybe talk a little bit about how you've thought about that continuous learning throughout your careers, and whether that was something that you did in-house or something that you did that was connected to ATU. And how that continuous learning mindset, maybe just talk a little bit about that mindset and how important that is for your career. So maybe, can I start with you, Keith? Is that okay? And then we'll kind of go down the panel this way.
Yeah, no, I think it's critical. I think you have to have that mindset. I think in the company, we have it's called total learning, and it's all about focusing on how you constantly develop yourself and you're constantly learning. And it is a lifelong learning journey. At the minute, I'm doing a Corporate Governance Institute diploma for board excellence, but that's just to give yourself another string to your bow. You can always learn, and another reason for doing that is to get into a network that you can build relationships. But as a company, if you're not providing, in terms of the UN SDGs that were up there, that's really critical, especially for the next generation of kids. They really are looking at the UN SDGs and tapping into them, because there's emotional connections to each one of those that are mapped out. Where the people are from underprivileged backgrounds, where they don't have access to education. And you need to provide that education as a company and show them that there is a path to continuous learning, because they have an emotional attachment in a past life where they couldn't access that. So all of that is really important. So it may look like a set of colours on a big diagram, but we're really focused on those. And lifelong learning and education is a key part of. We've picked 5 of them. Of course, you can't hit them all, and education is one of the key pillars, and we built the total learning around that. So it is really, really key, and it's really, really key for people, even to attract and retain staff and all that kind of stuff. So, people really need to look at those, and I think it's great that the UN SDGs are being focused on from an ATU perspective, because they are key and really important to people, and lifelong learning and the provision of that is ultimately one of the main ones that the next generation are looking at.
Yeah, great. I love that connection to the learning and the SDGs. I think that's really, and looking at the SDG targets, I think that's really exciting to hear that from industry. That's also something that's kind of playing it that's into play. And the fact that there's now this new bursaries for this course here, I think is really exciting for people to be able to access from an ATU alumni perspective. So thanks, Keith. Evelyn, talk to us a little bit about learning and learning journeys as a scientist, as a business owner. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think if you want to stay successful and grow, learning is part of that. So at CLS, we started in food and environmental. And we had to become really, really good at it. And the only way you can become really good at anything is by learning it and practicing it repetitively until you become really strong. And then the MedTech reached out to us and asked us to start doing on-core testing. So we had to become really strong at MedTech. And it takes you years to become an expert. Yeah. And again, you start employing people who are much stronger than you. You were borrowing their expertise and their advice and their support. And our last development would have been medical, which started out of COVID. So we did get into the COVID testing. We wrapped it around 15189, the standard, because everything we do at CLS is accredited. And now we're going down that pathway of doing lots of medical testing, supporting the network, and also the cell therapy part, creating infrastructure and buildings so we can actually help people deliver projects faster. Just before Christmas this year, we're hoping to launch something which I've nicknamed the career wall rather than a career ceiling. Yeah. And the career wall is intended to show anybody who goes over to the wall and actually wants to see what do you need in CLS to become the chief executive. So first you have to get rid of me, but it's actually in the learning and skills bracket. So if it's your first day in the job and you're a driver and you're collecting samples and you've just done clean room behaviour and you've just done aseptic techniques, but you want to become, we'll say, the CEO, it's the skills and the experience and the journey that you plot along that. And a lot of that's learning on the job. But to stay, somebody used the word curious, but also motivated. I'm shocked that I'm more motivated now than I was 10 years ago. I'm shocked at it. I can't believe it. The only thing that limits me is my energy. Yeah. So it's like I'll play out every hour of the day until I'm exhausted. And I'm so engaged because we live in a world that's full of opportunities and we just have to navigate our way until we get there. So also, this is probably obvious to everyone, but sometimes it's nice to go back over the obvious a little. Mm-hmm. Education will always be the single most important passport for anyone. So a kid that's leaving school, that gets into college, is getting closer and closer to their cluster and their tribe and their network that they belong in. Mm-hmm. And as you go through life, and as you go through the career, the privilege of being in a career that you love and having access to training without limitation is freaking incredible.
Yeah, really is.
Yeah.
And, there is a book Anne-Marie Bathmaker and her colleagues wrote called The Degree Generation. It's talking about how parents really desire wanting their children to go to university, right? This is their aspiration. But they think it's the piece of paper, but in fact, it's also the network and they're opening doors to their lifelong learning. And that's what they're really getting, when they go into education. That's the real transformational experience that they're having.
It's literally a step out.
Yes, absolutely. And, there's also a lot of research out there, Julia Friedland-Fisher and others that talk about an inherited network, how important your network is around you, your community, your parents, your family, who love you and connect and support you. But as you go through education and learning, you also develop new networks. And that's what education can also provide you is, connecting with people that have similar, Keith's going to be finishing his governance. He's going to meet a whole group of new people who have a passion about governance like him. And so these are people he can draw on and, we can continuously build new circles of networks that can help us throughout our lives. Damien, do you want to talk to us a little bit about lifelong? I know you've already touched on it already about some of that, but do you want to talk a little bit about the lifelong learning learning piece?
Yeah, I think it's changed. I mean, I remember coming out of college and thinking, that's it, I'm done. Like, I'm never going to learn anything again, or in terms of education, I just want to go and work and make money and all of that.
Yep.
And I was fortunate then, within a short time, I worked with a company, British Airways, who were very much investing in people, and you realise the range of courses and the material. But also I think that it isn't just about the courses. There's a piece around, if you look at how coaching and mentoring has developed now, and certainly we would offer it to a lot of our people, they're sort of relatively new concepts, but they're growing at a very fast rate, and I know a couple of people very involved in it globally. And they're really important, and that's where probably from an opportunity perspective in terms of ATU and connections, I think there are opportunities there, whether that's in manufacturing or in public healthcare, or just and sometimes it's useful to get someone from another sector looking in, because they're coming in with no baggage, no lens, but they can give you advice around that. So I think from a learning perspective, there's all the traditional routes that you can do, the innovation, the masters said myself and Keith undertook, and there was a huge amount of learning and connections, and I still keep in contact with people, and in fact come across people through work that were on that. But equally important are those other connections that you can make, other opportunities for learning, be it short-term learning. There's obviously pieces to do with your professional development, but also then your personal development is much more important. So I think one of the things that universities and third level can do is give people that sense that, unlike me when I stepped out and thought that's it, I don't need to learn anymore, that's it, I'm just going to go and work and earn money, is that piece that actually it is all about ongoing learning and development, and there's lots of different ways. It doesn't always have to be the PhD. It may be very important for certain professions or disciplines, but for you as a person and the roles you might want to take or the industries you want to work in, and you may end up in sectors I would never have thought I'd end up in the health sector. I started in computers. There'll be lots of other people, I'm sure, in the room who started in different walks of life and have changed. So I think those come through connections, they come through having support from people and who can guide you maybe formally or informally. So I think that's the other way where the third level sector at ATU through this work here can assist people in terms of making some of those connections around that mentoring support, be it formally or informally.
Yeah, I think there's a really important component around learning. I'm glad that you touched on that, because when we're thinking about that informal learning piece, and when people are telling their career stories as you have today, it's not linear. You're not just going into a course and going to a career forever, that it's actually been this circuitous kind of route. And when you have those mentorship opportunities, you can talk to other people about how that's. So for those that are, I guess, students and, recent graduates, it's okay to have those kind of stumbling blocks, and then to look for a mentor to provide, or be that mentor to somebody else to provide them those kind of informal learning opportunities. So thank you. That's a great, a great addition to that always learning component. And if I guess we can kind of close off this section, and we might even have a little time for some questions, imagine, from the audience. But on the section where we're talking about kind of always ATU, I'd like to maybe ask the panel about how you could consider yourself now, like maybe from an aspirational perspective. How would you like to see how you're contributing back to ATU? How would you like to kind of connect back now that we have this kind of, from Galway all the way up to Donegal region? How can you see that this could be something that, either you personally or, kind of see those, see some opportunities there with the alumni piece? If I can start, Damien, can I go back to you and talk to me a little bit about what you see about your contributions or aspirational contributions?
Sure. I think I've mentioned things like the reunions and maintaining contact. I think that's very important, and probably that can be facilitated. Letterkenny was a good example. I think we were out 10 years, they facilitated, and since that we've kept that going every year. But we probably wouldn't have done it if the college hadn't supported us at that time. Like Keith, I have a sister in ATU Sligo now,
yeah.
And she roped me in to do an odd lecture as well, just in terms of their public health work and their health courses. So, and again, that's interesting in those sort of areas. I think at a practical level, certainly in the manufacturing and other areas, there's huge opportunities there in terms of how those connections can be made to support people who start out with ideas and to know there's a way, because I guess when you start there, it's very difficult to know what's there. So I think we've talked about a lot of the areas, and actually under the headings that were up earlier on, I think it's how do you develop those, and again, it's hard to do it all, so where are the ones that might make the biggest difference in terms of those connections? It's also knitting it together. Again, I have friends working in all three colleges. How do you knit, and we always have this problem in the health system as well, when you restructure, how do you knit it together to create the sense, because the brand and the label is one thing, and then you've got to create that sense underneath it. And certainly personally, I would have had a pride in coming through Letterkenny, having done the course and gone back and done the course there with the Masters with the University of Ulster. And I think how do you maintain that pride in such a big geographical area? And I think the roots, I mentioned the county earlier and all of that west of Ireland, I think there's something in that about how you connect that together that's almost, I won't say in competition with the Dublins and Corks and Limericks, but the big cities, or the bigger cities. I'm in Galway, so I need to be careful. But it's how do you connect that together? So I think there are opportunities around it. I do think you've got to knit what's there and build on what's there, which I know the President mentioned earlier as well over the last number of years, from the roots of the RTC buildings going forward. So I think there's a lot of scope, and it is individual connections and how you bring those people back together. And we're just 3 examples. There's lots of other people out there who equally have done, you know, lots of great things in terms of how they've developed careers and opportunities.
Yeah, I just love, you know, this idea of the synergies. You know, that's a challenge for ATU, you know, as they are being knitted together and woven together, if you want to use weaving, since we're in this part of the region too, is that, you know, if we're talking about weaving all of these components together, how can we ensure that our alumni get woven into that fabric? You know, whether that's providing internships or providing guest lectureships or getting them involved in the curriculum development, etc. So how can we help, you know, to ensure that they're always in mind? So how do we make sure that all facets of the institution, whether that's academic and support staff, all the way, you know, through are thinking about alumni and all components of that work. Love that. It's great. Evelyn, what about you? What do you see as some kind of aspirational ways that you can get involved in ATU, or that ATU can see those?
I think to reach a higher level of success, if there can be some level of communication around strategy. And sometimes that might have to be dedicated company on company with a lot of things in common, potentially. So ironically, in the last few weeks, I have booked a meeting with that in mind for this campus.
Great.
And that's to share kind of our future plan over the next 18 months, to find out more about the future plan of ATU, and just see how we can help each other. So I'd be hoping to leverage off a lot of the knowledge base, look at QQI structuring, looking at maybe specialist courses that I can leverage off. So I would say learning and development intersection is a good one. I'd also say communication. So that's potentially a harder one, but constantly having a bias of recently communicated something that may become relevant. And then it's that recent bias that kind of draws you back to that conversation that you had that now is relevant and wasn't before. So I'd say probably a bit like building a company or building a business. There's a lot of energy and effort involved, but it all starts by meeting the individuals, getting a point of sitting down, talking about gaps or opportunities, and how do you build on those. That's, I suppose, in my simple way, that's really how I'd see it work.
It's extremely strategic way, though, too, thinking about that, the strategic synergies that you can have and it's mutually beneficial. So this isn't one side winning or losing. This is about both sides being able to have that mutually beneficial prospect. I think that's terrific. Keith, what about you? What do you see as some kind of aspirational ways that you'd like to kind of stay connected to ATU?
I'll be quick, Lauren. She's sweating over there in the corner. I guess 2 things really, I suppose, when we talk about industry engagement. You know, it's easy for industry to give out about that engagement, but
yes.
we have to push as well, and we have to help. And, you know, we have to get more involved, and we have to really put ourselves out there, because I think, you know, you build the likes of the development centres and the research centres and all of that, but then industry has to come, and industry has to contribute to that, because otherwise it doesn't work. And I think industry is guilty of, you know, giving out and then not contributing. So I'd like to help in getting more involved in that, and helping, you know, form the ecosystem that really works. So I think that's something over the next few years that we should keep a focus on. But then maybe one that's a little bit more out there is I'd like to see the way research is done in colleges changed.
Glad you mentioned research.
I think it's far too long. I think the pace of change in technology now, it's 3 to 5 years is no good. And I think if we can do research in sprints and prove the concept and say, okay, we're going to move to the implementation phase or not. But industry is not interested in 5 years. 5 years is, we've moved on, we've lost out. So I'd love if we could change that, if we could work together to change that. And I guess that would then maybe look at the whole area of intellectual property and research. That can be a stumbling block. So if you can stitch that into how you do research, and we could change that a little bit, I think that would be a huge step forward.
That's great. So I think, the word ecosystem keeps coming up. Our words connection, human connection, and this idea of dynamic, connections that we can have. If I can maybe thank the panel for this terrific conversation. I think there's a lot of nuggets that came out of that. So thank you so much. And can I put it back to Sean, please? And thanks again for your contributions. And what a great start for the ATU alumni. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's very difficult to follow something like that. It's been very inspiring and very, very interesting. And I know we could listen to you for much longer, but I am very conscious it is Friday afternoon, and I'm sure you've all busy schedules as well. I'd like to thank Keith, to Damien, to Evelyn, and to Maria for the inspirational words that you've given us here this afternoon. I suppose I've been making just a few notes as we went through this afternoon, and I suppose there's key things that are shouting out at us. Things like helping and support, being no linear paths, things like talent, connections, relationship ability, I like that phrase, and the whole idea of relatable role models and the whole idea of borrowing experience. So I think we need to take all those elements and use those. But I think the word of the afternoon, hopefully you'll agree with me, and I think this is what we're about. The word of the afternoon is ecosystems. I think is what we're learning here with it. So really what we're doing here this afternoon, and we've hopefully successfully done so, is that we've marked the establishment of ATU's alumni network. This is a really important point. It is just a starting point. We are starting that journey with you, and we want to ensure that we're supporting career growth with all of our graduates and with everybody who's part of ATU. There's 3 quick things we're going to ask people to do, which we know, and you'll see them around here. We want you always to be remembering to be supportive of ATU, which you are, to be learning, and the learning is a two-way process, and the flip side of learning is teaching, as you know. So we want to be able to learn and teach from one another and work with one another. To stay connected, which is really important, and we will be coming back to you and engaging with you on that. And also to provide inspiration, which is what has happened here this afternoon. It's been huge inspiration, inspired, and knowledge and details given to us on what's happening. Finally, without further ado, I would just like to take a few minutes just to thank everybody involved in today, to thank you for coming, to thank everybody who's joined us online, and particularly to thank our alumni and our guest speakers, and also those people who've worked with us behind the scenes. As you all well know, these events don't just happen. There's quite a big team behind the scenes that work with us here, and particularly our marketing and communication team. I think have done a fabulous job, and I'm sure you'll join me in thanking them in the way we know how in terms of an applause. In particular, we don't normally start singling out people and everything else, and it's something we try and avoid, because obviously this is a huge team effort and it's a very large organisation. But in particular, I'd like to thank Lauren Rellens. Lauren is our alumni officer, relatively recently in this role. We'd like to thank her for all the work that she's done, and she will be the face and the engagement, and she will be the person that will be contacting you and doing all this work. So thank you very much, Lauren, for all the work you've done. So without further ado, what we'd just like to do is thank you again, and just to say that there's some refreshments just out in the lobby, but thanks again.